This case contains no mystery about what happened. That part is clear, documented, time-stamped. The question is why, when everything was already written down, no one stopped it. Before the violence, there were records, emails, reports, statements, concerns raised quietly, then formally. A pattern of behavior that escalated in predictable steps. Withdrawal, fixation, anger without release. Nothing about this was sudden, which is the most disturbing part. Before the event, there was the file. A collection of observations, interviews, and structured assessments, bound by a single paperclip. It represented a moment of formal scrutiny, a point in time where the system was asked to render a judgment. At one point, the individual was evaluated. This wasn't a casual conversation or a passing note in a logbook. It was a comprehensive, multi-stage process designed specifically to gauge potential for harm. The request for evaluation itself was a signal, an acknowledgement from within the system that a threshold of concern had been crossed. Multiple sources had contributed observations. Subtle shifts in behavior, concerning statements, a pattern of social withdrawal that seemed to be accelerating. The file was thick with these anecdotal data points, each one a small, red flag fluttering in the margins of daily life. The evaluation was meant to translate this collection of anxieties into a clear, actionable risk assessment. It was an attempt to impose order on chaos, to find a signal in the noise. The tools used were standard, validated instruments, questionnaires with hundreds of items, designed to map the intricate topography of a human personality. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, the Psychopathy Checklist Revised, the Historical Clinical Risk Management 20. Each question, each checkbox, was a data point. Did the individual exhibit a grandiose sense of self-worth? Was there a history of impulsivity, a lack of remorse or guilt? The answers were recorded, scored, and cross-referenced against actuarial tables and clinical guidelines. The process was methodical, clinical, and detached. It was designed to remove emotion and subjectivity, to rely on the cold arithmetic of risk. The final report synthesized these scores into a narrative, a clinical portrait. And in that portrait, the evaluators found troubling features, but they did not find a monster. The individual was not diagnosed as dangerous, but flagged as concerning. The language matters here. In the world of risk assessment, precision is paramount, but it is also elusive. The final summary was a masterpiece of cautious, defensible prose. It avoided definitive labels. Words like psychopath or imminent threat were nowhere to be found. Instead, the report was filled with carefully chosen modifiers and conditional phrases. Displays traits consistent with, may be susceptible to, warrants further attention. These are the phrases of a system hedging its bets, balancing the duty to warn against the potential for legal liability and the rights of the individual. The report was a document written not just for clinicians, but for future lawyers and review boards. Every sentence was constructed to be technically accurate and professionally sound, even if it failed to convey the true depth of the evaluator's unease. The most potent warnings were buried in the subtext. Words like monitor, continue observation, low immediate risk. Low risk does not mean no risk. It is a term of art, a specific classification within a structured professional judgment framework. It means that, based on the available static and dynamic factors, the probability of a violent act occurring within a short, defined time frame, the next week, the next month, is statistically low. It is a statement about imminence, not potential. The low immediate risk label effectively closed the loop on the formal evaluation. It fulfilled the administrative requirement. The box was checked, but it also deferred responsibility. It pushed the concern into an undefined future. It means later. For the overworked case managers and supervisors who received the report, low immediate risk was a green light to de-escalate. It allowed them to shift their focus to the dozen other cases on their desks that were flagged as moderate or high immediate risk. The file was placed in a cabinet, a follow-up date penciled onto a calendar for 6 months down the line. The system, having identified a potential problem, had officially decided to wait. There was a window. It did not arrive with an announcement. There was no formal declaration, no memorandum circulated to mark its beginning. It was, in its essence, an absence of finality, a period of time defined not by what was happening, but by what had not yet happened. It was a space between the signal and the noise, a quiet interval where the trajectory of events remained, for a short while, pliable. This window was not a grand portal, but a small, administrative aperture. It was measured in business days, in the cycle of internal reports, in the time it took for a memo to travel from one desk to another. It was the gap between a question being asked and an answer being required. A period of time where intervention, even the most minor, might have changed the outcome. We often imagine intervention as a dramatic, forceful act, a slammed fist on a table, a decisive order that cuts through ambiguity. But the intervention required here was far more mundane. It was the act of picking up a telephone instead of composing an email. It was the decision to schedule a follow-up meeting for the next day, not the next week. It was the simple, human gesture of walking down a hallway to ask a clarifying question, rather than letting a concern dissolve into the ether of shared, unspoken assumptions. These were not heroic feats. They were small, procedural nudges. The kind of routine administrative adjustments that are made 100 times a day in any functioning organization. Each one, on its own, was almost insignificant. A single signature, a forwarded report with a note attached, a request for a secondary review. But collectively, these small acts of due diligence could have introduced just enough friction into the system's momentum. They could have created a pause, a moment of collective reconsideration. The potential change would not have been dramatic. It would not have been perfect. The outcome would not have been a clean resolution, a storybook ending where all risks were neutralized and all parties satisfied. The fundamental issues, the underlying pressures, would have remained. But it would have been enough to divert the course by a few critical degrees, enough to buy time. And in systems like this, time is the most valuable commodity. It is the raw material from which better decisions are forged. A delay of 48 hours, a week of further analysis. This was the modest prize waiting to be claimed. It would have been enough to allow for a more thorough briefing, for a dissenting opinion to be heard, for a single crucial piece of data to be cross-referenced. It would have been enough to transform a certainty into a probability, and a probability into a manageable risk. The goal was not to prevent the storm, but to give people enough time to find shelter. Instead, the system did what systems often do. It defaulted to its design parameters. It followed the path of least resistance. It waited. Waiting is the institutional equivalent of a neutral stance. It is an action that masquerades as inaction. On the surface, it appears prudent, a sign of careful deliberation. It avoids the immediate risk of making a wrong move. To wait is to gather more information, to allow the situation to develop, to avoid committing resources prematurely. In the logic of bureaucracy, waiting is often the most defensible position. It generates no immediate error reports, triggers no immediate alarms. And so, the system waited. It waited for the next scheduled meeting. It waited for a formal request to be submitted through the proper channels. It waited for someone else, someone with clearer authority or greater responsibility, to act first. Each individual component of the system, each person within the chain of command, saw their own inaction as a small, justifiable delay. They were busy. They had other priorities. They assumed someone else was closer to the problem. This diffusion of responsibility is the bedrock upon which systemic failure is built. Because waiting feels neutral. And in a risk-averse environment, neutrality feels safe. It is a shield. If events turn out poorly, one can always claim that they were following procedure, that they were waiting for a clear directive. It is a posture that protects the individual, even as it jeopardizes the collective. It is the quiet, corrosive belief that the greatest danger lies not in a bad outcome, but in being held accountable for it. This illusion of safety persists right up to the moment of fracture. The system continues to hum along, processing its inputs, generating its outputs, all while the window, that brief and vital opportunity for a course correction, quietly closes. The gears of procedure, designed to ensure order and predictability, grind onward, oblivious to the fact that their steady, methodical rhythm is now the very thing guaranteeing disaster. The safety of the process becomes the source of the danger, until it isn't. When the event occurred, it unfolded quickly. As predicted, the sequence matched prior concerns with unsettling accuracy. Location, timing, behavior. This wasn't chaos. It was follow-through. Afterward, there was another process. Not a trial, a review. What was known, when it was known, who knew it, and slowly, painfully, a realization formed. No single failure caused this, which means no single fix prevents it. Buried in the paperwork was a sentence. Brief, unremarkable, but devastating in hindsight. A statement that described the outcome without meaning to. Not a confession, a forecast. And it was accurate. We like to believe violence announces itself. We tell ourselves stories where the villain has a tell, a shadow that precedes them, a discordant note in the symphony of the everyday. It's a comforting fiction, one that suggests a world that is fundamentally legible, a world where danger adheres to a narrative structure. We imagine a clear, unambiguous signal, a single, shattering moment that cuts through the noise and makes the path forward undeniable. A moment where the abstract threat becomes a physical presence in the room. This belief is a psychological necessity. It allows us to function. It lets us draw a clean line between the time before and the time after. It presupposes a moment of perfect clarity, a threshold where the ambiguity of a situation finally collapses into a single, actionable truth. In this imagined scenario, heroism is simple. Responsibility is clear. The correct choice is not only obvious, but instinctual. We would know what to do, because the moment itself would demand it. We would act, because not acting would be unthinkable. This framework gives us a sense of agency, a belief in our own capacity to recognize and confront evil when it appears. It's a story we repeat in our films, our books, and in the quiet reassurances we offer ourselves in the dark. It is a story of control. But this case, in its meticulous and devastating detail, proves something worse. It proves that the world does not operate on our narrative terms. It demonstrates a more insidious and far more common path to tragedy. One that is not marked by a sudden, dramatic rupture, but by a slow, creeping accumulation of facts. The truth is that violence rarely arrives as a thunderclap. More often, it is a slow gathering storm, its approach signaled not by one great alarm, but by 100 tiny tremors. It is a series of whispers before it is a scream. It is a pattern that only reveals itself in retrospect. This case shows us that the monster is not always at the door. Sometimes the monster is in the paperwork. It is a footnote in a meeting's minutes, a line item in a risk assessment, a flagged email in a crowded inbox. It is a collection of data points, each one, on its own, perhaps explainable, perhaps dismissible. But together, they form a mosaic of impending disaster. The horror is not that the warnings weren't there. It's that they were, and they were cataloged with bureaucratic precision. The evidence was not hidden. It was openly available. The warning signs were visible, documented, and agreed upon, and still they were not enough. Think of the sheer administrative weight of it all. The reports were filed in triplicate. The assessments were conducted according to protocol. Committees were formed, meetings were held, and concerns were formally noted. Each step in the process was followed. Each checkbox was ticked. The system, designed to prevent this exact outcome, functioned exactly as it was designed. It observed, it recorded, it archived. And in doing so, it created a powerful illusion of action. The very act of documenting the risk became a substitute for mitigating it. The problem was named, and in naming it, it was somehow contained, transformed from a volatile, real-world threat into a manageable piece of data. A case file, a reference number. Responsibility was diffused across the organizational chart, spread so thin that it ceased to belong to any single individual. When everyone is responsible, no one is. The language used in these documents is a study in cultivated detachment. Words like concerning, noteworthy, and requires monitoring appear again and again. They are the vocabulary of passive observation, not active intervention. They are words that protect the author, that fulfill a procedural requirement, but they lack the force to compel action. They are the language of CYA, cover your ass, a dialect spoken fluently in the halls of bureaucracy. This language creates a buffer, a safe distance between the observer and the observed, between the knowledge of a threat and the feeling of its imminent danger. The problem was successfully transferred from the realm of human intuition to the realm of institutional process. And there it sat. The agreement, too, was a hollow victory. To agree that a situation is dangerous is not the same as agreeing on what must be done about it. The consensus was an agreement on the diagnosis, not the cure. It was a shared acknowledgement that allowed everyone in the room to believe that the burden was now shared, and therefore, lighter. It was a collective exhale, a sense of, well, at least it's on the record. The record, however, does not act. The record only remembers. It is a perfect, passive historian of all the moments where a different choice could have been made. It is the ghost in the machine, a silent testament to a failure of nerve, a failure of imagination, and a failure of moral courage. The system was designed to see, but it was not designed to feel. And so, it saw everything, and it felt nothing. This reveals the fundamental flaw in our response to risk, because knowing something happened does not carry the same urgency as knowing it. The human mind is wired for the present. We are creatures of the tangible. A potential future, no matter how probable, remains a theoretical construct. It is a ghost, a whisper, a statistical abstraction. We can look at the data, we can read the reports, we can nod our heads in sober agreement, but the visceral, gut-level imperative to act is often missing. This is the chasm between intellectual understanding and emotional conviction. The knowledge that a catastrophe occurs lives in the prefrontal cortex. It is a matter of logic, of probabilities, of risk matrices, and contingency plans. It is a problem to be managed. But the knowledge that a catastrophe occurring, or occurred, is a primal scream that echoes through the amygdala. It is a full-body, physiological event. It is the adrenaline, the cortisol, the fight-or-flight response that bypasses rational thought and demands immediate, decisive action. Our systems, our committees, our procedures, they are all built to operate in the realm of the theoretical. They are designed to process the might happen. They are not equipped to handle the transition to the is happening. They are too slow, too deliberative, too encumbered by their own rules. The gap between these two states of knowing is not a gap of information. It is a gap of urgency. It is the difference between a weather report that predicts a hurricane and the feeling of the wind tearing the roof from your house. By the time the theoretical becomes tangible, the window for prevention has already closed. All that is left is reaction, response, and regret. And by the time the difference is clear, it's too late. And with that, the official record simply comes to an end.